Today I will be talking about externalities, and I will also introduce two traditional ways of which we can attempt to normalize such externalities. So in economics, anytime there are two parties who both perceive that they will each be better off in doing business with one another, they will choose to do so. And in the course of any business, there are, of course, costs which need to be factored in and accounted for. Private costs such as those which are associated with owning or renting a property, equipment, labor costs, etc. There is, however, also oftentimes an external cost or social cost which affects an uninvolved third party, costs of which the other two parties don't always account for. And this is what we call a spillover. Spillover, or an externality, can either be positive or negative given the situation, but I will for now just be talking about the negative kind of externalities. So, as a hypothetical scenario, let us suppose that we have a factory which is involved with producing plastic water bottles, and during the course of production there is air pollution that is emitted and carried downwind where it accumulates right above a bird viewing preserve. And this is a place where many tourists and bird watching enthusiasts come from all over to view these birds. And because of the pollution that is being emitted from the water bottle producing factory, many of these birds have become ill and are therefore leaving the preserve. This, of course, negatively affects the business of the owner of the bird viewing preserve. So how do we fix this negative externality and others that are just like it? One method that was first suggested by economist A.C. Pigou was that we could simply impose a tax on the producer which is causing the negative externality. In this situation, it would be the factory that is involved with producing plastic water bottles. Pigou suggested that by simply imposing the tax, we would effectively reduce the amount of production and hence reduce the amount of negative externality which is being carried downwind and affecting a third party. There are, however, many difficulties that are associated with this method. Notably the cost of monitoring, which can be quite high by imposing a tax. We don't always know, or the government agents don't always know the exact or efficient amount of taxation that is appropriate for the given situation. There is furthermore a very vast asymmetry of knowledge and information in society, which government agents don't always have the easiest time comprehending. And as a result, oftentimes improper or inefficient taxes can be levied on producers which don't produce the best outcome. Also, it can be very costly and time-consuming to effectively monitor those who are having the tax imposed on them, and making sure that they are producing an efficient amount. There is also another way in which we can try to normalize negative externalities, and this was suggested by economist Coase, and hence is called the Coase theorem. Coase suggested that by simply assigning property rights to either party, either the one who is imposing the negative externality or the one who is incurring it, both parties will have an incentive to negotiate with one another, and there will likely be an efficient outcome which is produced. Coase stated that in order for this to work, the property rights must be well-defined, divisible, and defendable. And by well-defined, what is the object of which the property rights have reign over? By divisible, are the rights separable? Can they be traded? And by defendable, are the property rights recognized? Are they enforceable by either the law or by well-respected customs? And as long as you have these three qualities, well-defined, divisible, and defendable property rights, we can simply assign those property rights to either, in this case, the bird viewing preserve or the plastic water bottle producing factory. So let us suppose first that the property rights are assigned to the factory, and therefore they have the right to produce and to pollute. In this case, the owner of the bird viewing preserve would have an incentive to negotiate with the factory and to find a level of compensation of which the bird viewing preserve is still able to profit, and a level of which the factory is also better off while still producing less, and hence less pollution. We could also conversely assign the property rights to the bird viewing preserve, in which case the bird viewing preserve, the owner of the facility, would have the right to no pollution. In this case, in order for the owner of the factory to continue producing, he would have the incentive to negotiate with the owner of the bird viewing preserve, and he could in turn compensate the bird viewing preserve at a level of which he could continue producing water bottles, but not as many water bottles, and therefore would cause a lesser amount of pollution, which would be more diffuse and would not cause the birds at this facility to migrate away. So as long as we have clear property rights, and moreover, as long as the negotiation or transaction costs of these property rights are very low to nil, then we should be able to have an efficient outcome without any outside intervention or imposition of any tax by a governmental agency.